Hey everyone, it's Monica from Popcorner Reviews, and today I am sharing an exclusive interview with Laura Everly, the director of the new documentary series Milk Money. Milk Money looks at the rising cost of raising children in America, and it is told from first-hand perspectives of real parents, not a social media highlight reel, not from experts, of the challenges they face day in and day out. Laura Everly really has a beautiful filming style and a way to connect with these families. The stories are touching. I definitely had tears in my eyes, and I think you're going to really enjoy this perspective. Milk Money is available to stream for free on millionstories.com, a new streaming platform which focuses on financial literacy. All the content there is free to check out. So head on over to millionstories.com to check out Milk Money as well as some other really cool series. Hi, Laura. I'm Monica. I host a family entertainment blog called Popcorner Reviews, and I'm so excited to talk to you about your recent project, Milk Money.
Thank you. Thanks so much for talking with me.
So, Milk Money is 10 real conversations with parents about the increased cost of parenting and what that means in today's world. I'm so interesting. I've watched a handful of episodes so far, and it's not the perfect social media highlight reel. It's not told from the perspective of an expert, if you will, and can you just talk a little bit about why you wanted to approach this topic from that perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that we live in a world where we're just consuming social media all the time. And I think that parents can get these false notions of what parenting looks like. And there's, so many mommy bloggers and influencers. So this felt like an opportunity to create something that was like a salve to that social media, and especially with money, which is something that people just tend not to really want to talk about that much. But people do. I mean, like in our circles, like with our friends, we're like, so how much are you paying for preschool? I don't know if this is normal. But it's always sort of in this like hush hush way. So I was like, well, we'll just talk about it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I didn't want it to be like another advice column. I wanted it to be an opportunity for parents to talk really candidly and freely about the struggles and successes that they've had dealing with money through the portal of parenthood.
If anything, watching these episodes, it just makes it so apparent that there isn't a cookie cutter approach to parenting. Every situation is different. Everyone is facing different, challenges, different situations. And I'm curious, as a viewer watching this, what are you hoping that people will take away kind of as a next step?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're exactly right. Like so many of these parents handle money differently, and they're all really interesting workarounds. I think that first and foremost, I just hope people kind of feel seen and heard. I think that like parenting can feel kind of lonely sometimes, and you can have a lot of questions like, am I doing this right? And so I think I'm hoping that people feel just connection and
Mm-hmm.
a feeling of community. Ultimately, I want it to kind of be like a resource. And I hope that depending on the episode, that they can walk away with like a little bit of inspiration to, just hear other people's stories, and whether they're feeling overwhelmed or whatever it is, to think like, oh, well, look at these people and look at what they did. That's a really cool trick. I'm gonna, whether it's something small like coupons for baby formula, or something big like setting up a 529 account, early on, whatever it is. I think like just hearing other parents talk about it, there's something about peer-to-peer conversation that
Mm-hmm.
resonates more than like an expert coming in. I rather hear my friends tell me what to do with my money than some like 60-year-old white guy in a suit. So I think if we all just keep talking about it in an open, candid way, then we're all going to help each other.
Yeah, absolutely. In one of the episodes, one of the moms was talking about how she thinks about money now. She has maybe a spreadsheet, but she thinks, okay, if I buy this, it costs me this many hours of my working time, and is it worth it? And I was like, wow, like I think that would put a whole new perspective on it for me, and is something that I plan to kind of put into practice too, as kind of a unique perspective.
Yeah, no, that line from Amira has stuck with me too, because I didn't really think about things that way. But it's like, is this dress worth like whatever it is, half a day's work? And like sometimes, yeah, maybe it is because I'm gonna rock that dress for years. But sometimes you're like, maybe not. Like, I think that was
Absolutely.
the perspective that you shared.
Right. Yeah, all of these stories are really they're so emotional because they're so human and they're so real. And, your filming style, you just feel like you're there living with them day to day, and it didn't feel staged or anything of that sort. And, I'm curious, you're there as the director. Were there ever any moments when filming where you got pulled in, just as a human being, where you were like, oh, like this is getting to be, emotional for me right now?
I think I cried. That sounds like a total baby, but I think I cried shooting almost every single episode at some point in the interviews. I was the person interviewing, and so I'm there to hold space, right? So ultimately, it's really a conversation between them and the audience, but in the moment, it's a conversation between me and them, and I need to be there with as most of a present, open heart as I can be, so they feel like it's a safe space to
Mm-hmm.
share their stories. And so many of them had really, emotional stories, or it just talked about, fighting to be in your kid's life and getting into a DNA test, or having a miscarriage, or whatever it is, realizing you were pregnant when you thought you were about to be deployed to the Middle East. Like there were so many moments shared that it was like it was impossible not to have just this human to human, mom to mom conversation, because I felt like I was a mom on a journey. All of these different stories, and I think that the good thing about documentary filmmaking is there's always a story you set out to tell. And I had a lot of phone calls with the families before we showed up to film, and so I felt like I knew what their stories were, and what we were trying to capture. But then you got to stay open-minded and be loose. And in every episode, there was like really interesting things that came out that I didn't expect. Like I didn't know they were coming. I didn't know they were going to be a part of their story. And so you can't craft it too much, because you got to leave that breathing room for those really important things to be shared.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a scene where the one mom was in the car and she had the news come in from the vet about their family pet. And that scene, and then watching her have to explain it to her daughter later at home, was just like gut wrenching to me.
So that was our very first day of filming. And I knew when we showed up, they had actually asked to push the shoot like the night before because the dog had eaten something. And I was like, it's a moving train. I'm so sorry. Like, I don't think we can. But that is a perfect example of like, we were just getting in the car and she got that call, and the DP looked at me from the front seat and was like, should I film? Like with this look in his eyes. And I was like, I was like, yeah, roll.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just deal with it later if she's comfortable with it. But like, she didn't even know she was being filmed. She thought the camera was just sitting on his lap, but I was like, this is real life happening right now, and now she's gonna have to, and it brought up something so real that parents deal with, is we just don't even have like the space to grieve, because it's all about our kids. It's like, you're sobbing, and then immediately I'm gonna cry, like just thinking about it, immediately turn around to her daughter and deal with her pain about it. And they actually went and put the dog down in the middle of filming, and then they came back and we kept going. And that's just a perfect example of like life unfolding before you as a documentary filmmaker. And I just give the families so much credit for being vulnerable and letting us be there through those real life moments.
Yeah, they were very raw and they like hit you where it counts, and I'm sure you made so many emotional connections with those families during the time you spent with them, kind of day in and day out with them in their daily lives. Have you stayed in touch with any of them, especially like throughout COVID? I'm sure that adds another element to this, challenges that they could be facing.
Yeah, I'm in touch with all the families. If they weren't friends before, they are now. And I think that, like, you sort of go through something together and you want to stay in touch. And, just even in the era of social media, it's nice to just be like, oh, look, the twins are walking or whatever.
Oh.
We are following, the foundation is following up with the families now and doing some follow-up interviews because of the pandemic, just to see where they are and how the pandemic has affected their situations for better or worse. Because I do think that, like, parenting and everything that Milk Money addressed is like even more pertinent now in the pandemic. Kind of just like life on steroids, and so I think it'll be really interesting to follow up with them. And in some cases, I think a lot of these families were already set up for it, like the family that moved to Texas, living in a trailer, and they were already homeschooling and they're like off the grid. And I feel like, they were growing their own vegetables and their own chickens. Like, they've probably been like prepping for the pandemic unconsciously this whole time. Or, Elena on the on the Navajo Nation, she does a big source of her income is doing these online fitness coaching. And so we're like in the era of online. So I don't necessarily think we're just going to get a bunch of stories of like total demise. I think it'll be interesting to hear like ways that people are thriving in the new normal and ways that they're not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think it was really interesting too. You kind of just mentioned it too. Like, people have a lot of different outlets that they're using to create income and stability for their families, and there is no normal, if you will. And in each episode, you kind of shared some stats around, that episode, and they put that at the end, which I thought was a really kind of cool thing, because you didn't hit the viewer with the stat out of the gate, making them think something before they even saw the person's story, but you led with that human, approach. Was that intentional, that you kind of followed up at the end with the stats, or, was that something that, just kind of came about naturally?
Well, so the foundation always wanted this ultimately to be a resource for financial tools. And so they wanted the stats to be there, but I actually pushed really hard for them to be at the end, because I thought it was really important that we fall in love with these parents and these families first. And if there's a personal connection, then you're going to stay tuned and not log off and hear their story. And then the information is going to come out. It's going to unfold naturally because you're connecting with, let's say Joanna and Ray, and then you're going to get the information about the child care and the cost of it and all of that stuff, because you're connecting in a really like organic way and in a personal way. So I wanted to end with the stats versus like spoon feed anybody about what to think.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you don't really necessarily want to give it away. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
the episode, another one I love, with Jen and Jack and their son is on the spectrum. It's like, you don't necessarily know that he's on the spectrum until like a minute or so into it. And you're just getting to know this kid. And I think it's a much more interesting journey to be in the audience to experience that versus being told like, here's a kid that's autistic. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's, yeah. So I always wanted to just take people on like a little bit of a journey and make sure that they personally connected with the families.
Well, I think, yeah, all of the stories were beautifully told and just very inspiring to watch. So thank you for bringing these to us, these living portraits for us to watch. And thanks for taking the time to chat with me today about Milk Money.
Thank you so much, Monica. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.